In today's episode, I am joined by Nathaniel Turner, author of Raising Supaman. Nathaniel's story as a father is remarkable because he created a life template for his son before he could even walk, and the story of how the book came to be is one worth listening to. But what makes Nathaniel's work so powerful is not just the success story, it is the commitment to helping parents raise amazing kids, break cycles of generational trauma, and heal the wounds that too often gets passed down. In this conversation, we talk about fatherhood, intentional parenting, and what it really takes to build a life of freedom and purpose. You already mentioned your, I must say, interesting choice of words. You said the man who calls you dad.
Calls me dad.
Yeah, the one who calls you dad. That's an interesting choice of words there. But I do, well, first of all, just thank you so much for being on my podcast. I'm really excited to have you here. And I must say, the first initial message that you sent me is what prompted me to want to have this conversation because it triggered me immediately. The first sentence you said is that, what if you didn't have the father that you needed, so you became him? And that was so profound. And I have been reflecting on that ever since. I do want to dive deeper into the book that you have been writing about the blueprints of how to become a parent while healing yourself. And I really want to talk about that. But before we get into that, could you please just talk a little bit about, like, what do we need to know about you to understand kind of what brought you to that point? What is the background here? I would love to know that.
I would like to think I'm fairly uncomplicated. So the simplest things to tell you about me: I'm originally from Gary, Indiana. I am the son of Tommy and Gladys. I was raised by a village, so not like in the wild, but there are people. It says it takes a village to raise a child. There were multiple people who loved me for no reason and poured into me and to allow me to essentially change my life, to get out of Gary, to be able to go to college. And so I think of my life in two ways. There's the before Naeem, which is the guy who calls me dad. And then there's the after Naeem, which is the guy who calls me dad. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Tommy Turner is the most pronounced person in my life through my first 30 years. And Naeem, who the guy who calls me dad, is the most pronounced part of my life for the second 30 years of my life.
We got you. So when you say you were raised by a village, can you go a little bit more into that for me?
Sure. So most people like to talk about, what my parents did or didn't do for me. I was raised in a city called Gary, Indiana. I know you mentioned you're from Norway, so these may be completely irrelevant facts to you. But Gary, Indiana was the first city in America to have a black mayor. And so that made Gary a very interesting place. When there was political upheaval during the late 60s, most people convened to Gary. So Gary was a very interesting place to be born in, to be born black in a city with the first black mayor. So today, when people are talking about diversity and all that kind of stuff, in some ways I laugh because that's all I ever knew.
Right.
So that was a very interesting time. But the people there were mostly people who had migrated from the South. People who had college degrees. Some people had master's and doctorate degrees, but couldn't find work doing anything else. And those people became the people who became part of my village.
Right. Got you. Okay. Did you have any siblings growing up?
I have a sister. Yes.
You have a sister?
Yep. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Just one.
Just the one.
Just one. I can't.
Yeah, your whole face, that was enough.
She's enough.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, so can you tell me about what prompted you to write your book, and please share with my audience what that book is named?
Sure. The first thing that I wrote is a book called Raising Supaman, Supaman. And so Supa is Ebonic. Superman, because you can't say super without getting sued, right? That's owned by DC Comics. But moreover, the book was written, they're a collection of letters that I wrote to Naeem. And Naeem is my son. So I would just say Naeem. I wrote letters to Naeem, and I started writing notes to him before he was born, to this unborn child, about the things I wanted to do and that I wanted the child, opportunity I wanted the child to have that I didn't have, and in ways that I wanted to find a way to be better. But that child at 2, one afternoon, he and I were walking to the mailbox to get our mail, and he said, "Hey, Daddy, where's my mail?" And I was like, man, there's nothing in this mailbox but bills and junk mail. And he's like, but daddy, I want mail. And so that prompted me to start writing this 2-year-old letters. And I didn't want to write him letters as a 2-year-old. I wanted to write him letters as a 22-year-old or as a 32-year-old or as a
Mhm.
42-year-old because I was afraid that, A, I would mess things up like my father did. But also I realized that I wanted to, that I may not have, like, I may not be wealthy and leave some, wealth, financial wealth to him, but maybe I could leave some lessons to him about
Mhm.
what it meant to be a man or be a good person. And so that's what those things were. They were letters that I just wrote to him. He left the country as a 16-year-old and decided he wanted to chase his dream of playing professional soccer. So he moved to Brazil. Yeah. And because he was ahead of the curve in terms of his academic preparation and he spoke fluent Portuguese, he was able to move to Brazil. Before I dropped him off, I put some of the letters that I'd written him over the past 16 years in a binder and I left them with him. And then I went to Rio for a few days because I think all men should go to Rio by themselves for a few days. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I went to Rio for a few days because I was in the country, and my wife told me I better stick around to make sure he gets adjusted well. And then she calls me and says he's not doing well. You're gonna need to go back.
Mm.
So when I go back to see him, I said, "Are you okay? Because your mom says, you're probably ready to go home." He says, "No, no, no, I'm good. Can I just ask you a question?" I said, "What?" He said, "Did you put the letters in any particular order?" And I said, "No." Why? He said, "Because I reread the first three of them. I remember my purpose. I'm going to be fine. But here's what we're going to do, Dad. Whenever I come home, we're going to publish these letters." And I said, "Are you sure? Because these letters are from me to you." He said, "No, no, no, Dad. We're going to publish these letters because other kids need to know what I know." And I said, "What's that?" He says, "When you tell me I can do something, not only do I know I can do it, I know it's going to happen." And so that became, 18 months or so later, he came home, he had a concussion, and he did all the work to get the book published.
Wow, that is such a beautiful story. I did not expect him to be the catalyst to actually make this happen, which actually makes the story so much more beautiful. Um,
Absolutely.
so how old did you say he was when he first read the letters?
Well, so I started writing him at 2. So I wrote him, I would write him all the time. If we had a good day, I wrote him. If we had a bad day, I wrote him. If the sun shined in a particular way, I wrote him. So like I call him my sunshine. So Sonshine. So I would just write them. "Hey, I thought about you today. Hey, this is something you didn't do this quite right. You could do better. Hey, you did this great today. But let's remember why this happened." Like what I really try to do is be process oriented. So
Right.
rather than focus on outcomes, I say, "Hey, why were you great today? Why were you poor today? Like let's talk about why did you win this award? Why did people not, treat you right?" There's always a process to stuff.
Right. That is so profound. I really enjoy listening to what you're sharing here, just because I also really want to read that book, by the way.
Well, you got it. You tell me, and I'll make sure I'll get you a copy of it.
Oh, that would be incredible. So okay, so I must say I'm curious because you said that you wanted to give him a father that you didn't have. So I
Hmm.
do wonder if you like to what extent are you comfortable talking about what that
Yeah.
looked like in the sense that you wanted something different and you want to
Hmm.
provide that for your son. What is it that you were quote unquote lacking when you grow up?
Yeah. So hindsight being 2020, because I've had some perspective since I've written the book.
Mhm.
Um, my dad and I we butted heads. And my father, if he was here, I know he would say, "Well, I didn't have a father." This is what he would say: "I didn't have a father. I did the best that I could do."
Mhm.
As a child growing up, you think that's a woefully lazy answer. Like, guy, hey, you could be better than this. Um, but at the time, all I could ever see were things about my father that were bad. So I watched my father be be abusive towards my mother. I saw things that no child should ever see. I would, by any terms today, people would say my father was abusive to me. But then things that I may have thought that were abusive as a child, for example, I always tell people the story, but I wanted a 10-speed bike. And on my ninth birthday, my parents bought me this motocross bike that looked like, it looked like a motorcycle. And he told me not to get it. He said, you don't get that bike. Next year, you're going to be too big for it. Everybody else is going to be riding 10 speeds. Why don't you just get a 10 speed? And I wouldn't do it. So in this lesson that he taught me, I learned delayed gratification, because next year when it came time for my 10th birthday to roll around and they said, what do you want for your birthday? Of course I said, I want a 10 speed. But when you're a child and your parents are poor, they're not going to be able to repeat this big gift every year.
Right.
So this time my father walked me to the garage and he said, what's that over there? And I said, a lawnmower. And he said, what's that over there? And I said, a shovel. He said, what's that over there? I said, a rake. He said, okay, you have everything you need to buy your 10 speed. I'll loan you some money for the gas tank, because it was like around April. I'll loan you the money for your first tank of gas. But if a man wants to eat, a man has to work. And then he just walks out the garage. And so I've been self-employed. I've been an entrepreneur for the last 30 years. And so I attribute that in some ways to those early lessons that I learned from my father, which seemed cruel at the time because all my friends could just get whatever they wanted. And my father was like, no, nope, you should learn how to work. And once you figure it out, I'm not going to give you any money again because you figured out how to do it. So as a kid, I thought my father, that kind of stuff was cruel. I did see him do some cruel things, but as I've gotten older, I've had an ability to say, all right, well, nobody is all of one thing. And
Right.
and we're mostly like two sides to the coin. There's a side to the coin of my father that we never would do well together, and I want it to be better than, but then there's the other side of my father, the coin, that I want to make sure that I teach my son how to be independent and believe he can do anything he wants to do, except.
Right. Yeah. No, I thank you for sharing that. I mean, there's so many nuances to growing up, right? And we're always going to look to our parents because it's just the default almost, and I mean, we all done that dance where we're thinking about like, oh, I would never do that when I become a parent. And then
Right.
growing up, kind of understanding why that had to be said and why that had to be done. And at the end of the day, it's the disciplinary part of it that is actually the most helpful anyways. But how do you so you said that your father said that he didn't have a father either.
hmm
So there's kind of like a generational trauma here that is kind of
Absolutely.
repeating itself.
Yep.
Has he ever opened up about what that meant to him and to what extent he wanted to make a difference?
So sadly, my father passed in 2018. So
Oh,
he's
I'm
not,
so sorry to
no,
hear
no,
that.
so it's okay. It's okay. So he's gone in flesh, but he's here in spirit because
I
I'm
hear
still
you.
having a conversation about him. So he's still alive, in that regard. My grandmother, my father was born in 1942 in Alabama. So in 1942, in 1941, this 14, 15-year-old girl was pregnant. And at that time, she had to get shipped away because she's an embarrassment for the family, right?
Oh,
You
okay.
can't be pregnant, right, at 14 or 15. And
Mm,
and so his father, I believe, impregnated two women around about the same time.
mm,
So he has half brothers and sisters, and there's him. Um, the half brothers and sisters lived with the father, and they lived in a city in Ohio. And my grandmother moved to a city in Indiana, and so he didn't have his father wasn't in his life at
mm.
all. His grandfather raised him like he was the male figure in his life, but in terms of a day-to-day person in his home with him, he didn't have that.
Oh,
I went to meet my grandfather when I was 25. I
oh,
went to
wow.
meet his father. Yes, because I was curious about the person whose genes my father inherited and what they might mean for me. So I did go meet him.
Of course. I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. I think we hear so many of those stories. I also have a dear friend of mine who was she was adopted and she had this very deep, deep need to know where she's coming from. And although she loved her parents and was so grateful for her upbringing, there is this identical need to be able to look to where you came from. So I
Yeah.
understand that need. Would you want to share about what that experience was like?
Oh yeah. Well, again, so you don't have to ask me. You just say what you just share, and I'll share it. I'm here
Perfect.
to share, so no worries. Uh, I met a young lady and I dated her a little bit and found out she was from a city called Lima, Ohio. And I was like, Lima, Ohio? I think my grandfather is from there. And she said, well, what's his name? And I told her his name and she said, oh, I know him. He owns this and he owns this and he has these are his children. And I was like, are you serious? She said, yeah. I said, well, if you go home, next time you go home, if it's not asking too much, can I go with you? And she said, sure. So the next time she went to Lima, I went with her. And so she drives me to his home and we get out the car and I ring the doorbell and then we hear the garage door coming up. So I walk off the porch to go stand in front of the garage. And this man comes out the door, under the garage, and he looks just like my father. I mean, like the splitting image of him. And he looks at me and like, can I help you? And he was, really court. I'm like, okay, yep, yep. You're my father. And I said, Mr. Moore? He said, yeah, who's asking? I said, well, sir, my name is Nathaniel, but you probably don't know me. I don't know you. I don't know you. I said, but you know my dad, Tommy Turner? He says, oh, oh, oh my. And goes back in the garage and goes in the house. Lets the garage down. Then the door, right? Look at your face. Then someone comes to the front door when we run the doorbell, and she says, "Hey, Nate, come in here, baby." And I don't know who she is, but her name is Nona. She's no longer with us either. But she invites us in the house, and she says, "Hey," her young lady's name was Stephanie. "Hey, Stephanie, how are you? How's your mom? How's your family?" Like, they all knew each other. I'm sitting there like I have no idea who you are. My father's father then sits on the floor next to Nona while she's talking to us. He's sitting on the floor like a child. And I was like, this is so very interesting. This is so interesting. Yeah. And so I was there so he says, hey, we're going to get your dad's, some of your dad's brothers and sisters, some of your uncles and aunts, get your cousins. Well, I'll be right back. And I was there about 90 minutes or 2 hours. He never came back. And we exchanged, we exchanged phone numbers and he never called. I never heard from him or saw him ever again.
Is that true? Oh my goodness. I thought this was going to be a story of like the beginning of a fantastic relationship. Oh my goodness.
No. And when I got back to Gary, I told my dad that I went, and because I was in law school at the time, I said, hey, I went to Lima for what? I said, I wanted to meet your father. For what? I told you he was a jerk. He was da 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 da. I said, yeah. But you're part of him. Like trees and fruit, Dad. That's your tree. You're his fruit. And now you're my tree and I'm your fruit. And I'm curious to know the roots. I want to know the roots of who I am, why I am, who you are, why you are. Well, I told you already. I said, it really helped me to meet him.
Yeah. I totally understand that. What was your takeaway from that visit?
Allow me to give my father a little bit of leeway and give him some credit. He could have done just like his father. He could have cut bait. He and my mom, they certainly struggled. He could have left. He could have not been around at all. In which case, sure, I would have had moments that I thought were more joyous. I certainly would have had fewer whippings. I would have been on punishment probably a lot less, but I'm not quite sure that I'm absolutely positive that I wouldn't have turned out the way that I've turned out, for better or for worse, right? I wouldn't have turned out the way I've turned because I got lessons from him that I couldn't have gotten, I don't think, from anyone else.
Right. And I mean, also your father was also kind of living in a time where talking about your past trauma or feelings or however you experienced your upbringing wasn't necessarily the norm. Maybe. So I love that you're framing this as an opportunity to empathize with your father as opposed to blaming your father, because I mean that's
Yeah.
what we all want to do. We just want to blame them, but at the end of
Right.
the day, that's not helpful. Like, we're still here, we're still the ones responsible at the end of the day to get ourselves to where we want to. Um, can you tell me your absolute favorite story to tell?
Sure. About my father or about about my son?
Anything at all?
So first, can I say this? The what you just said was profound, and I just want your audience to recognize this. I can't ask my son to offer me grace and mercy
Mhm.
if I am not willing to offer my father the same grace and mercy.
Oh, that
Right,
is
right.
so good.
So
That is so good.
right, right. I can't look in the right. My son is a reflection of me. My father, I'm a reflection of my father. If I can't ask the thing that sees their reflection in the water of what they'll grow up to be, which is me, then I can't be, then I can't ask him to forgive me when I fail. And I'm going to fail, right? To be human is to fail. I'm going to
Mhm.
fail. I fail all the time. Just the other day, he and I were working on something. And he said, "I thought you told me to do it. Why did you do it?" And I said, "You're right, I did." And I said, "Go ahead, let me take my whooping," right? Because I have to be okay with admitting to him that I've fallen and I failed, because my father failed, and and I'm sure if he could have articulated it, he would have wanted me to offer him grace and mercy. So I just want to say that that's where that comes from. My two favorite stories with my father, one of them is just the one about the bike. I learned so much about that bike that the subsequent summer, well, that summer, I then made flyers and I had a lawn care service, and I was making so much money that my parents would ask me how much money did I need money. I was like, no, I'm fine. And I parlayed that into what would have been like a pop-up restaurant, because again, in the 70s, most of the children were what we call latchkey kids. So their parents went off to work and we all stayed home and sort of took care of ourselves, but nobody knew how to cook. So when the other kids were coming out with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and bologna and cheese, I was making gourmet hamburgers and tacos. And in the morning, I was making waffles and pancakes. And I stayed with my grandmother and I learned how to make homemade biscuits. So I had my own food, uh, my own little restaurant. So I was cooking and making money and selling my food to all the kids in the neighborhood. I would get on my bike and my sister's bike, because my bike got stolen. I would ride to the grocery store to replace the stuff in my refrigerator so my parents would know. And I did that from like the 6th grade to the 8th grade till I almost burned down the house because I elevated my cooking to barbecuing. So, so I was barbecuing too. So yes, but I learned that. That's a lesson that I learned because of my relationship with my dad.
That is so interesting. How old were you when this was happening?
So I was 10 when I bought my first 10 speed. It was a red Schwinn 10 speed. But I was 10 from 10 till I started high school is I think 14, 14, 15, 16, 17, 14. So from 10 to 13, 14, I ran my own little pop-up restaurant every summer.
That's incredible. That is absolutely incredible. Yeah, that is a phenomenal story. I do there was something you said right before you started sharing the story that I kind of wanted to go back to, actually circle back to, because I do also realize that one of my greatest ones too has been with my father and my frustration with my father, and you were talking to offering grace because you're going to become a parent yourself one day, kind of thing. And I know that's going to be true for me too. And it's so interesting how you can't really be maybe ready to step into that role and be successful at that, in the sense that you want to have a good relationship with your child if you cannot offer that forgiveness to your own parents. And I think that has been probably the one thing that I've struggled with the most. And I wonder what that looked like for you to get to that point of forgiveness.
So you said stories. I got 1,000 of them. But the moment that I realized that I needed to change my perspective, the first time I had an inclination, it was Father's Day, 1997. Nine was two. We were living in this apartment, and I was watching a commercial. He and I were watching television, and there was a Hallmark commercial for Father's Day, and it was a father, a son, and a grandfather, and they were going fishing. And I was watching it, and I just fell apart in tears, thinking about I wasn't going to have that. I was never going to have a moment with my father and I were together with his grandson. Never, because my father made it painfully clear he was not interested in having a relationship with this child until the child was 18. That's what he told me when I took him to meet his grandson as a newborn baby. Bring him back when he's 18. I thought, I don't like babies. Those are his words. So yeah, so here I am. I'm in this watching this commercial, and I'm got tears in my eyes. But I have a child with me who sees the world through my eyes. I am everything to him, and here I am wasting my energy on somebody or some memory that is not even real. Whatever I'm thinking about my father is not real. It's not in the present. The only thing that's present is this young man with me. And it was at that moment that I realized all I'm going to do is destroy this relationship, worrying about something I don't have. Take
Mm.
what you have and make the most that you can of this, and don't worry about the part that's not currently a part of your life. So
Right.
that was the most helpful thing. I'm going to ruin this relationship if I'm focused on
Mm.
something else. I gotta be attentive. I have to be present and accountable for this young man, and that's what I've tried to do for the better part of 30 years.
Right. Wow. Yeah. No, I mean it's an ongoing journey, I believe. I mean, we're always going to,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think I'll circle back many times to like forgive and unforgive and forgive again. And it's not like it's like I never witnessed any abuse. I didn't witness any shortcomings. Well, I didn't
All relative.
I mean it's I always feel so guarded in talking of I'm going to rephrase that because I'm not really guarded when it comes to talking about stuff. But okay, let me rephrase that because I think initially what I'm trying to say is that I also recognize that I come from Norway. It's one of the richest country in the world. I am on the top of privilege, you know what I mean? I am so aware of that. So for me to kind of like look at my parents and be dissatisfied in any way, shape, or form just doesn't make any sense when you're looking at the
Right,
grand scheme of things. But
right,
that being said, I have created this podcast for all of us to share our stories, no matter what they are. We're not
right.
comparing anything up against each other because we all are going through life with a set of experiences that are shaping us. And
Mm-hmm.
that is going to look different for absolutely everyone. But that being
Mm-hmm.
said, the emotions in which we go through, I think that's very often similar to all of us. And when you speak
Yes.
about your father, I can relate to a lot of those emotions, although we're
Yeah.
completely different in many
Right.
ways. So
Mm.
I do, I do really value and appreciate that I get to have these conversations with other people. And I'm super grateful that you're here to share your story. So thank you again for that.
My
Um,
pleasure.
would you how did your relationship with your father show up in your marriage at all?
Wow. Um, I tried to be the complete opposite of my father in my marriage. Um, my parents, I wished my parents for so long would have been divorced and they stayed married because I never saw my mom. I never thought my mother was ever happy in the relationship. And so I wanted to make sure that whoever I was with was actually happy to be with me. Like even in terms like, and this may be my mother may listen to this one day and be like, I can't believe you said that, but I'm going to say it anyway. Like even in terms of intimacy, I would know my parents were being intimate, but when they came out the room, my mother looked like somebody had stolen all her money. She looked so unhappy, and so as a young man, I'm really sensitive about. Well, I don't want to do anything that makes somebody else look like that when it's over with. So,
Right.
so yeah, in my father's ability to hold down a job, I'm very sensitive about, hey, I got to make sure that my wife doesn't have to need or want or worry about anything. I have to figure that out. It may be too much pressure to put on someone, but those are the kind of ways that it showed up, having watched my parents in my own relationship.
Mm, yeah. Are you guys still together?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
We've
yeah, yeah.
been married for 32 years.
Oh,
Yes.
congratulations.
I
That's
was gonna
amazing.
say 32 long, long.
Yeah. Why do you say that? I'm curious because
No,
I
no.
am not married, but I am aspiring to be.
Well, it's a little bit of a joke, but 32 years is a long time. It's more time. I've been with her longer than I was ever by myself.
You have been with her
So,
longer than I've been alive.
okay, well, there, yeah. So that's a long, long time. Yes. So, um, but in terms of people aspiring to be married, I would say, and you're not asking me for marital advice, but if you were, I would say that I think of marriage much like people talk about sustainability in terms of the environment and the sun and so forth. I would say whoever you marry, you can marry because you love them and you find them attractive and all that's great. But I would be the larger thing I'd say is find someone who you believe you can have a sustainable relationship.
Yeah, that's very good advice.
Because if you decide, and by sustained relationship, I mean if you decide you have a child and that relationship doesn't work out, like you have to, the relationship has to be sustained well enough that that child's life is not hindered. The
Right.
child's life is going to be hindered in some respect, but you know what I'm saying, that it's not so terribly hindered that they can't accomplish all of the things that they're capable of accomplishing.
Right. Yeah, that's really good advice. I want to circle back a little bit to just mostly now I'm kind of curious as to maybe what you can offer in terms of advice on my end when it comes to my relationship with my father, just because I recognize that like you're a man, you're a father yourself, you probably can relate somewhat to him and like what I cannot fathom, like stuff that is hard for me. Like for instance, one of the points that I've had is that it was really, really hard for my father to express his feelings towards any of us, really, in terms of saying I love you or giving compliments or even just
Got
keeping
it.
track of what's going on, really. I've always found that my dad was terrific in terms of showing up for my mom, but I always felt like if my brothers and I were hanging off a cliff next to my mom, she would have saved my mom. That's how like I felt my whole life. It's like I know he loves us, like rationally I'm fully aware that he loves us so much, and like if I really really thought about it, he probably would pick one of the children, but I always felt as though he would choose my mom because he would be hopeless without her. And she was more or less the provider in our family. So I've always kind of been in the dynamic in which the mother is the breadwinner and the
Mhm.
father is
Mm.
they
Should be the caregiver. Right.
like
Right.
present but distant. So in terms of how I can empathize more with someone who struggled with expressing their emotions to their children,
Hmm.
do you have any thoughts?
Not knowing your dad, I'll be spitballing a little bit. But the first part I do understand, in terms of the father not expressing his emotion. My
Mm,
father, I think I heard my father tell me he loved me once. I
mm,
think so. I'm not positive. The number of times I've told my son that I love him is incalculable. Like every day, multiple times a day, write it in letters, send it in cards, put it in balloons. Like everybody and anybody knows. And my wife would probably say, "Hey, if he had to save somebody, he would leave me out. He would save your child." So that in that regard, I understand that. But I also would say, how old is your father? Probably
64.
okay. So your father and I are
No,
in a
62.
similar.
My bad,
Okay,
62.
right. It's fine. We're in a similar age frame, and while I don't know Norway, I do know how men are socialized. And if men in Norway are socialized anything like men in America are socialized, then we're socialized not to be emotional. We're socialized that men don't cry and men don't express emotion because emotion is weakness and all that. This this thing that we're doing now is new, where men are talking about their feelings and mental health. That's new because men didn't do that. We used to keep everything bottled up. It was terrible. It was a terrible thing to do, but that's what we did. So that means your father is a product of a time when that's what men were doing. I would also say that you mentioned your mom is the primary breadwinner, then that also has to be a heavy thing to carry, even if you it, even if you say it's not. Socially, folks are looking at you and thinking about you in a certain way, which I would imagine would breed some level of, hostility, maybe sometimes towards the people around you, because you may not feel that good about yourself. I can say, as someone in 2008, the the markets crashed. We had the more whole mortgage crisis, and I am a financial advisor. So my clients one day had, X amount of wealth, and the next day they woke up and they had 40 to 50% less wealth.
Mm.
The world, everybody's mad, and they're mad even at people like me who had nothing to do with it. I did not crash the markets. But now I'm married to someone who's accustomed to a particular kind of income from me, and now I can't produce it. And even if she doesn't say anything, I feel a certain way
Mm.
about me because I've defined myself as a man through providing.
Right.
And providing, as we see it, is a financial provision. So I would imagine that, again, without knowing your dad, I would just say for me, it would be tough. And I would understand how I might not always be the most pleasant person because there are elements of my socialization as a man that are being questioned that I haven't worked through, or I don't have the answers for just yet.
I mean, I feel like you hit the nail on the head on many things here, at least based on like what I already know too. And I've also been watching, there's this one podcast that I really liked, the Diary of CEO, and I found so much information there, especially when it comes to like these inconvenient truths that we don't necessarily want to hear just because we're trying to create this very equal society.
Right.
But I remember hearing once that, no, this is not that it's a conscious choice, but men are supposed to be the provider and women are supposed to be the emotional provider, right? So when those roles are switched, and in many situations it might work out, but I do still believe that there's might be this little element of, I don't know if emasculation is the right word here, but I definitely always wondered if he always just didn't believe that he was meant for more. That because his father, my grandfather, I never met him personally, but based on all of the stories
Mhm.
that I've heard, it was really clear that he was the masculine figure, and my grandma was like definitely the feminine, and it was very traditional household. So it was always so questionable to me how it just flipped so drastically because both in that family and my mom's family was very traditional.
I believe if you asked, if my wife was here sitting next to me and my son was here sitting next to me, they would say the person who is the most nurturing is me.
Mhm.
And yet, and yet, I'm also seen as masculine. So I think while we have these roles, and I believe they're more artificial, they're more fluid than we want to acknowledge. And I also think that it's necessary that men know how to nurture because there's no guarantee that any of us will wake up tomorrow. And if I lived and my son was born and his mother passes, and what am I gonna do? You're not going to be nurtured because your mom no longer lives here.
Mhm.
Or if I died and I'm the disciplinarian, you're going to live a life without any discipline because your dad doesn't live here. I just think this is what I mean by sustainability. I think we
Mhm.
have to have more fluidity. Life is more nuanced than you're female and you do certain
Right.
things, and you're a male and you do certain things. Because in the end, as the child, you just said, I wish my father was more loving. And he'll never be more loving if all we ever do is we keep replicating the same old kind of men, which is that men have to be tough and we have to be the providers. How about providing be nurturing? How about providing be hugs? How about providing be a meal that they go in the kitchen to cook? How about providing be I sit down with you and I do the homework with you? Like that's provision too. If your mom is more capable of earning a living than your dad is, hey, so be it. That's great. Honey, go out and be as great as you want to be in the business world. And I'm going to make sure that our children turn out to be the exact kind of people that we always dreamt that they could be.
Wow. Yeah. I love that you're I love everything you just said. And it's like it's triggering so many thoughts in me right now. Can I share a story with you?
Yeah,
I,
sure.
based on what you're telling me right now, I am actually recognizing kind of in real time that I have probably been contributing to the problem uh, throughout my years as a teenager, because me and my brothers and my mom, frankly, we would all have kind of these conversations around how to navigate these relationships, because my mom was very clear on like the marriage and they were going to stick together. And I always like, in retrospect, I'm grateful for that. But there was certainly times throughout my teenage years where I was like, please give me a
Right.
different role model. Like, show me what a marriage is supposed to look like. And it's loving and caring and beautiful, not like holding on with your best friend kind of thing, which also is beautiful. Don't get me wrong. It's just that
Right.
bratty teenage self. But I've always been very confrontational, and my brothers were less so, but also solution oriented. So putting their brains together and my communication skills, we would always kind of have these quote unquote interventions with my father. But the problems is that when I'm looking back at it in retrospect, is that we had everything but empathy, and we never showed up with empathy. We never showed up trying to understand him and where he's coming from. We never showed up like trying to help the situation from where he was standing. We were trying to offer a perspective from how we experienced him, and we had a solution as to why that could change and what we wanted for it to change. But we never showed up with empathy, so we never actually came with the results that we wanted. It wasn't comprehensible for him, and therefore we struggled for many years. And I just want to share this because I also want to make sure that I kind of wrap it up as like a happy story, because it is. Because
Yes.
now that I'm older, I lived in the US, I've been apart from my family for 7 years now. Yeah, 7 years.
Okay.
Well, I've seen them every year, but like I have been living abroad for 7 years. And um in the process of making this podcast, the first 10 episodes were all scripted, and I would send it all to my parents to kind of proofread it all before it started, just because I was going to share so many intimate details of our upbringing.
Right. Right.
And in the process of my father reading through all of that and my mom reading through all of that and my brothers and my sister-in-laws listening to the podcast, my entire family is healing and everyone is doing better. And my relationship with my dad is better than it's ever been. He's going to church consistently now. He's in an alpha group. He's grown so much. Like I see that consistent like trial every day. But it wasn't until I showed up with empathy, and it wasn't until I showed up with the actual intention of us having a better relationship. But for me and my dad to have a relationship, like have a better relationship, I actually required us to be separate for a while and actually only praying for each other, because we didn't do a good job of talking with one another. We didn't do a good job of communicating productively, because for him, it felt like a wall that was like he would put up a wall because he just felt attacked and he couldn't take it in. And I
Sure.
just couldn't reach him. So I was so frustrated, because you're talking to your father, you're trying to make this relationship so good.
Mm.
And he just didn't want to listen. So now I'm happy that the overall message here is that when you continue the conversations, when you continue to nurture it and lead with empathy and understanding as opposed to attacking, that's when the true magic actually happens.
Yeah. Yep. So we'll see. Sounds like you got it all figured out.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's been a process, but I must say, like, I haven't really had like a father conversation in a minute, so it was really nice to kind of circle back to that a little bit. And I'm really grateful for what you've contributed to this conversation too. Do you have
My
any last stories or last thoughts that you would love to share?
I just want to leave you with two things. The first thing I want to tell you is that I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here and have to meet you and have a dialogue with you. I've enjoyed it immensely. The
Thank
second
you.
thing I want to leave your audience with is something I tell people all the time. Is I'd like you to focus on WHO, who,
Cool.
right? Who is the most important word in all human language, and it is a word that we oftentimes ignore. We don't pay enough value to it. So let me break this down if I can. Who? Maggie, if you ask me who I am, most people would define me as a father. That's how most people know me. I wrote this little book, and that book became this and led me to be able to do some other things. But so if you ask me who I am, I'd say, Maggie, I'm the world's greatest father. That's no question. And you'd say, hey, Nate, are you sure? You said, what does your son think? I said, the guy who calls me dad? Absolutely. I'm positive he believes I'm the world's greatest father. Then Maggie, you might meet him and you say, Naeem, what do you think of your dad? And he might say, my dad's a jerk. To which, Maggie, you know who I am? I'm a jerk. Because the only person who's able to define who I am as a father is the child. And what we oftentimes do is we forget that who we are is not about what we believe we are. It's not even who we believe someone else thinks we are. We are exactly who we are with those who we've decided to be in a relationship with. So that's what I've learned as a father. I could think I'm great. I could believe my son thinks I'm great. But unless I have a conversation with my son to find out who my son thinks his father is, I'm not so great. And so the second part of the who then becomes, who do I want to be as that young man's father when my time on this planet is up? See, because I'm not, so this is where when you're thinking about, what men typically think about, which is, did I provide? Could I buy a house? Could I buy a car? Did I buy my kids this? Nope. I ask, when your time on this planet is up, who will the record book say you were? Who will your obituary say you were? Who will people who speak at your eulogy say you were? And what will the last few words that appear on your tomb or your urn say? Because that, whatever that is, that's what you should be living for every day. So that's what I would encourage anyone. For me, that's a really a good guide to make sure that I don't necessarily lose my way. I'm not concerned about when I'm gone, who cares how much money I was worth? Who cares how many houses I had or how many cars I had? Or if my wife was the primary wage earner, nobody cares about that. What are they going to write about me when I'm gone? In my obituary. Who was I survived by? What did I do? Who loved me? When people show up at the church or wherever, if they decide to say something about me to eulogize me, they're not going to talk about how much money I had. I spent time in the pulpit for 3 years or so. I never had anyone show up and talk about how much money somebody had or what kind of car they drove, right? Unless it was some kind of humorous story. And I've never seen a tombstone that said he drove a Mercedes. He was worth $1 billion. Right. Here lies
$1 billion.
Right. Here lies a billionaire. I've never, right. I've never seen.
You're right.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. Just remember who.
Yes, that's great. I absolutely love that, because you're right. When I look at my upbringing too, and although the roles were switched or whatever, like, there's so many benefits to that. When I look back at like how that shaped me to who I am today, I wouldn't have it any other way. So
Right.
who's to say that it was wrong? Who's to say that it should have been differently? Like, we all turned out fine, but it's always going to be that element of looking at how could things have been differently, because that's what we do. And that being said, I want to create this image, because I was thinking about it as you were telling that story about the commercial that you watched with the grandfather, the father, and the son on a boat. And I would love to wrap it all up by just saying that one day I really, really hope that you get that, but you're probably going to be the
I'll be the
grandfather.
grandfather. Yeah, that's what I thought. Exactly. I was like,
His son and his son.
right.
Yeah.
What am I sad about? I get a chance to build this really great relationship so that if he has a son, he'll say, hey, come on, let's hang out with my dad. And then I would have gotten just what I wanted. Right.
Yeah.
So yes.
It's not too late. You'll still get plenty of those moments, and it'll be absolutely beautiful.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, Nathaniel. I really appreciate it. I feel so full just knowing everything you've said, and also just being able to talk about my own story the way that I have today too has also been kind of nice this morning. So I really appreciate it.
Good. We grow together. I appreciate you.
Yep. And one story at a time.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you want to come share your version of how your attachment style manifested itself in your love life, please email me on magsmindset@gmail.com. I can't wait to hear from you.